Do you guys remember that Molofic, I'm Here by NotOnlyMe, the one that just vanished out of nowhere and nobody knows where it went or why it disappeared? I made a video about it some time back. Well, recently Fancy Squilly has been kind of trying to rewrite that story from memory, but I always felt like I had some extra piece of that story that I archived, I just couldn't find it. And I actually did today. Unfortunately, I don't have the entire story, but I did discover that I actually recorded the first chapter for a video and just forgot that I had it. Unfortunately, I didn't record the rest of the story. Had I known it was going to disappear, I would have done so. But fortunately, you'll get to hear the first chapter here today. Now, do keep in mind, this story does touch on some not safe for work topics. It's not super explicit with it, but it doesn't skirt around it either. With that in mind, here's the first chapter of I'm Here by NotOnlyMe. Enjoy. I'm Here by NotOnlyMe. Chapter 1. Paulo remembers it all so vividly. It was the day that Mike broke things off with Sandy after being fed up with her infidelity and finally being honest with his feelings for Lucy. It took him a lot of self-reflection to do it, but Paulo never felt more proud. Mike instinctively came running to him afterwards like Lucy had all those years ago, and cried into his arms until the sun went down. Paulo soothed and coached him through it, putting emphasis on the fact that Mike had made the right choice despite all the pain. All the steps he took to finally end things will be worth it, and that it was his victory to own. Mike kept thanking him over and over, and apologized for taking so long to finally listen to his advice. He felt so guilty for not being more appreciative of how much Paulo tried to always look out for his best interest time and time again, only to be dismissed or yelled at. When Paulo tried to reassure him that it was all in the past, it was obvious that Mike's guilt about it wasn't easily assuaged and would take time to heal. Paulo learned to accept this as the Korak continued to apologize to him, tail puffed out in stress and tears renewed. He remembered Mike's fur being cutely mussed up, cheeks puffed and reddened from drying tears. It took a while for his friend to sober up, but Paulo didn't mind. He just knew he had to be there for his childhood friend. They've been putting up with each other's shit just as much as they've had each other's back over the years. This is an important milestone for both of them. Thank you, Paulo. You've always been such an amazing friend to me. Always so supportive despite it all. Mike manages to choke out with a hoarse voice. No worries, buddy. Feeling better now? Mike nods as he rubs the stress away from his watery eyes. He looks back up at Paulo with eyes that are suddenly clear of pain and tears. How could I ever repay you? He said in an unfamiliar, sultry tone that makes Paulo's blood rush. Wait, he doesn't remember that. Mike crawls towards Paulo on all fours tantalizingly, tail swaying back and forth behind him as he approaches the Somali with bedroom eyes that are impossible to look away from. Without questioning a single thing, Paulo responds with a cocky smirk and leans back invitingly. Mike climbs right on top with an uncharacteristic sense of boldness and wraps his arms around Paulo's shoulders, purring. How do you want me this time, big guy? All it takes is a sensual grind of the hips to make Paulo snap awake, horny and sweating. The teenager groans as reality splashes over him like a bucket of cold water. He curses his stupid hormones within the same breath while he's at it. He'd be lying to himself if he didn't occasionally fantasize about the short Korat, but the consecutive wet dreams as of late are a fairly new development. Grumbling, he falls out of bed and drags himself to the shower to wash away the embarrassing evidence of both body and mind. He barely hears his dad yelling up the stairs about ice and work and then the front door slamming shut. He mindlessly drives to pick up his friends for school, barely even sparing a glance at Mike when he gets into the car and proceeds to talk nerd shit with an equally enthusiastic Daisy and David. 10 minutes later, he drops the dork squad off at the main entrance, perfectly parks the car in the parking lot, then beelines to his locker. He doesn't snap out of his school day morning blues until he hears someone catching up to him. Hey, Paulo. He turns his head to see a certain Korak jogging up to him while clutching a bunch of books to his chest. I forgot to ask in the car, but I was wondering if you were still up for studying for that history test tonight. History test? The test that's tomorrow, Paulo? Mike replies with a strained smile, obviously expecting this outcome. Oh, right. That one. Yeah, I'm still down to study for it, buddy. Great, though there might be a slight change of plans, Mike says nervously, petting the binding of one of his many textbooks. If you're cool with it, that is. Paulo raises an eyebrow at this. My mom told me this morning that she's going to be entertaining guests this afternoon, and my little brother is going to have some play dates over. I was wondering if maybe we could study at your house tonight instead? Aw, is it because of your sensitive widow ears? Paulo asked playfully, twiddling his fingers around said ears. Mike snorts a laugh and bats away the offending hand. Yes, you dick. It'd be easier to study with you without all the noise. Yeah, we can study at my place tonight. Too easy. Mike beams at this. Alright, great. See you at lunch. And with that, the Korat trots off with his precarious pillar of textbooks to God knows where. Paulo fondly watches his retreating form before slamming his locker shut and dragging himself to homeroom to start the day. Looks like the sky might be getting kinda nasty up there, Paulo thinks out loud as he watches tiny snowflakes smack into the windshield of his car as he drives home after school. Mike checks his phone. According to the forecast, it should only be flurries tonight. Supposedly the worst of it should fly past us? Paulo is skeptical, but decidedly shrugs it off. They're almost at his house anyway. No use making a mountain out of an anthill over flurries. He carefully parks his car on the curb in front of his house so that his dad can park in the actual driveway. When he unlocks the front door and shoves past it, he is suddenly thankful that the house is in decent enough shape for guests. Not that he'd think Mike of all people would judge him, but that's not the point. He watches as Mike busies himself setting up shop on the kitchen table by sprawling neatly made notes and weathered textbooks all over it. Paulo internally cringes at this when he remembers why Mike is here in the first place. This was not how he thought today would pan out, but it ends up not being so bad. Watching Mike gush over the material was fun to watch at least. Normally, the teen is pretty reserved when it came to expressing his scholarly interests, but let him go at it and he'll talk your ear off. It was kind of cute, really. In fact, many of the things about him are pretty adorable, from the way his eyes shine with determination when taking up a challenge to being the first to volunteer his time to help someone else out are just the little things that make him, him. A boy that Paulo couldn't help but maybe fall a little in love with over the years. Ever since Mike finally realized how much of a defensive dick he was, he made strides in recovering from his mistakes and making it up to the people who always cared about him. Remove the tumor that was his failing relationship, and the sweet person that Mike has been all along got to shine through once again. The mentally healthier version of him even managed to rekindle a friendship with Lucy of all people. They aren't anywhere near what they used to be, but at least it's a step in the right direction between the two. As for Paulo, he just couldn't help but nurse the crush he'd had on Mike for a while now. The more the other teen improves as a person, the more the Somali becomes lovesick for the nerd. That's when Mike finally notices how quiet the Somali has been, as he was in the middle of info dumping about some dumb foreign civil war in the year 19 whenever. He stops in his verbal tracks to see Paulo sitting there, gazing through him as if he was daydreaming. He frowns at this, wondering which girl of the week Paulo could possibly be thinking about instead of focusing. Sorry about that. That must have been boring to listen to, Mike says as he looks away and rubs the back of his neck self-consciously. I'm supposed to be helping you for the test tomorrow, he mumbles mostly to himself as he shuffles through the reading material on the table. This snaps Paulo out of it, guiltily watching his friend turn crush. Here, maybe I can make things easier by making flashcards of the important dates and events instead? Mike tries to bargain as his green eyes scan through the study guide that was given to them earlier that week. Paulo feels crestfallen at his own inattentive behavior. Geez, sorry about that, Mike, he says with remorse, feeling guilty that the Korat is going through all of this trouble in the first place for nothing. It's not you, okay? I'm just not a history buff is all. He lies, knowing damn well it's because of Mike. No worries. If anything, this will help me sharpen my tutoring skills, the other teen answers light-heartedly as he digs through his backpack for a stack of index cards. Nothing wrong with adjusting your teaching methods. Paulo is about to protest when Mike's phone chimes. The Korat picks it up and reads the text message. My mom is warning me about the flash snow squall that is happening right now, he recites, glancing out one of the windows to see that it is whited out from the intense weather. She's advising me not to come home until later when it's over. Paulo nods in agreement to this. Snow squalls are very dangerous to drive through. It was one of the things Paulo learned about when getting his license. When it is over, maybe he'll wait until his dad gets home with the Ford WD truck to drive Mike home, just to be safe. One of the few benefits of being a construction worker. As Mike continues to look through the study guide to make flashcards with, Paulo insists on making an early dinner for both of them. It would keep him busy, while Mike could work in peace without feeling self-conscious about being boring again. He ends up making a humble but tasty meal of crispy baked chicken with pasta on the side. There's many things he's good at, but his self-taught cooking skills are something he secretly takes pride in. As they sit down to eat, he has to fight down the urge to think that this is some weird little date with Mike, who isn't helping because he keeps flattering him with praises about the food. Every admiring glance Mike gives him makes his heart skip a beat and inflates his ego even more. Thankfully, the both of them finish up before Paulo's ego gets any dumb ideas, and insists on washing the dishes as Mike finishes up the flashcards. As he wraps up his dad's dinner portion and puts it into the fridge, he hears Mike's phone chime yet again. He instinctively glances out the window and sees that fat snowflakes are falling down and piling up high already. Looks like an actual snowstorm followed up the snow squall. The clouds from earlier had changed their trajectory, Mike reads out loud to Paulo. The smallie shuffles to the living room to turn on the news to affirm this. Not looking good, Paulo says what they're both thinking as they watch the weatherman repeatedly point at the massive red blob hovering over the entire town. They immediately hone in on the scrolling line of text at the bottom of the screen warning which school districts were already going to be closed tomorrow. They waited with bated breath until they see Roseville District glide past. "We can go to bed later tonight," Mike says excitedly, already planning out how he's going to spend the extra hours. "And we get to sleep in tomorrow," Paulo yells with a fist bump. "The roads are now considered to be in black conditions. We advise no road traveling unless they are emergency vehicles until these restrictions are lifted," the weatherman chimes in gravely. They both look at each other with an oh shit expression on both of their faces. As Mike calls his parents, Paulo checks in with his dad. He finds out that the old man is going to bunker down in the construction office trailer until the roads are good again, which is probably going to be tomorrow when the snow plows and salt trucks can safely do their rounds. That means no 4WD truck tonight either. That also means, "Looks like I might be staying the night over," Mike says meekly as he hangs up on his phone. Paulo gulps. "Looks like it." "All the more time to prepare for your exam then," the Korat says half-jokingly to fuck with Paulo. The reply he receives is in the form of a thrown couch pillow to the face. "God, you're just like Lucy," Mike accuses Paulo when he gets his pixelated ass handed to him for the umpteenth time in a row. He watches in annoyance as Paulo's video game character eviscerates his in a particularly bloody cutscene from the KO. Paulo can only laugh at his friend's saltiness. At this point, he only keeps abusing that one combo just to get a rise out of the otherwise cheerful teen. Also, this may or may not be payback for Mike getting his way when they ended up having a rather fruitful study session after dinner. The flashcards were very helpful after all. "Here, have another cookie?" Paulo offers with a giggle as he passes over the plate of homemade leftover cookies that he totally didn't try to bribe his father with at some point. Mike angrily snatches one while mashing down the continue button on his controller. "These came out really good, by the way," Mike compliments as he thoughtfully chews his peace offering. "I always thought it was really cool that you're so good at baking." "Yeah, thanks. That recipe took a couple of tries to actually get down. I'm just glad I finally nailed it," the Somali admits as he nibbles on the last cookie on the plate. "I think I'm gonna try to make one of them jiggly Japanese cheesecakes that David never shuts up about." Jiggly Japanese cheesecake? Yeah, I don't know. He says he saw it in an anime once, so I figured I'd give it a try for him. Dude is gonna be stoked if I can pull it off. Mike looks down at his mostly eaten cookie with a huge grin on his face as if contemplating it. "You know, Paulo, you've come a long way since we were younger," he says warmly. Paulo looks at him questioningly. The Paulo back then would have considered baking to be, and I quote, "super girly gay shit." Paulo snorts at this, bemused at the irony. "Well, you're not wrong with that one. You're just so much more open about the world around you now. I mean, look at you," Mike exclaims, excitedly motioning towards all of Paulo. "You're developing yourself. You've got a job, a car, great people skills." He counts these off with his fingers. "And I feel that you give yourself so little credit sometimes. You're going to go places. I just know it." A warm smile graces his features as he talks about him, which makes Paulo's heart melt. Hearing this from Mike almost feels like a gut punch, but oddly a good one. As amazing and uplifting as Daisy can be when she says these things to him, hearing it come out of Mike makes him want to blush. He can't help but inwardly preen at the admiration he's suddenly being showered with. It's also showing growth on Mike's part that he's willing to see the positive traits of a person and see them for who they are rather than get stuck in the cycle of paranoia that poisoned his perception. It's refreshing to see that healthy side of him again. Yeah, well, look who's talking, he refutes. You literally fell from grace not too long ago, and now look at you. You're already back on track with the people you've wronged, but don't seem to realize it. On top of that, you're on your way to becoming the next history college professor at some Ivy League university or whatever. Mike whips his head up to look at Paulo square in the eyes, clearly taken aback. But I don't... Cut the shit, Mike. Paulo interrupts lightheartedly. You don't think I notice you being so hard on yourself when you think you messed something up with your friends? That you don't beat yourself up for making even the smallest, most innocent mistake nowadays? I just don't want to lose you guys. I messed up a lot already. Mike defends himself, worried about the direction of the conversation. Paulo can't help but snort at this. Lose us? It's true that you royally fucked up multiple times in the past, dude, but you managed to break yourself out of a toxic relationship, stop making bad decisions, and actually made an effort to become a genuinely better person. You think that your friends are going to give up on you now? Mike shrinks at this. He hunches over himself, wrapping his arms around his knees guardedly. To be honest, I'm not sure how you guys haven't given up on me yet, especially back then. I didn't give any of you a reason to like me. He deadpans, wrapping his tail around himself in comfort. Most of us always liked you anyway. Why would the little mistakes you make now somehow unravel all of your progress? Paulo asks quietly, as if not to scare Mike away, who flinches anyway. It's obvious that he wasn't expecting to be read like a book tonight, but Paulo doubles down. You never gave up on me, right? Despite all of my own fuck-ups? But my fuck-ups are way worse than yours. Nope, nuh-uh. We are not spiraling down that rabbit hole today, buddy, Paulo interrupts sternly. This isn't a competition of who did worse. The Korat turns silent, his eyes fixated on the floor. Listen, you're leagues above the person you were even a year ago. You deserve to give yourself credit for growing up too, okay? He is rewarded with silence. That is when Paulo realizes that this is the first time this conversation has opened up between them ever since Mike realized that Sandy wasn't nearly as perfect as he thought she was. When the old tool bag Mike slowly started to grow into the person he is now. It's new territory for both of them. Okay, for example, remember when you used to blow up every single time anyone even mentioned Sandy? Or would just yell at someone for whatever shit reason and somehow show no remorse for it? That wasn't even that long ago. Now you balk at the mere idea of it. That's some great progression, he says lightheartedly, meaning to just sort of rib the guy. But instead he sees a visible cringe from Mike. Yeah, I remember. I think about it a lot. Paulo instantly feels a pang of guilt when he hears his voice. It sounds so small, broken. He can practically see the gears in Mike's head whirring into overdrive. He has to remind himself that while the Korat is definitely in a much better headspace now, it's so easy to forget that despite all his aforementioned progress, Mike is still healing. His lack of self-confidence and independence still get the better of him sometimes and can become emotionally vulnerable because of it. Maybe a little bit too much, Mike, Paulo replies solemnly. It's great to self-reflect, but not to the point where you start to hate yourself over every little mistake. When Mike doesn't even budge a muscle at this, the guilt that Paulo has been feeling starts to form into a brick at the bottom of his stomach. Shit. Did he make a misstep? Shit! He instinctively reaches out for Mike. I'm sorry, did I push too hard? I didn't mean to bring it up like that. Mike sniffles. No, it's fine. I guess I didn't realize how much I needed to hear it coming from someone else. Paulo nods at this, finding it relatable. In that case, you know what else you need to hear? That you're really fun to be around now. You're genuinely likable and people choose to spend time with you, you know, Paulo openly admits. And it's not like you ever were horrible to your core to begin with. You were going through some weird shit and occasionally kind of put it on the rest of us. Maybe burned a few bridges along the way, he adds honestly, scratching the back of his neck. Mike nods slowly at this, still refusing to meet eye to eye with Paulo. But hey man, take it from me when I say, you're allowed to keep past mistakes in the past where they belong. He says the last bit particularly quietly, saddened at the notion that his friend is still struggling to heal despite it all. Don't let them define you, and just keep growing as a person. That's all I really ask for to be your friend. The two sink into an uncomfortable silence after that, digesting everything that was said. Despite the lingering tension in the air, there is a weight that is lifted off both their shoulders. That was until Paulo found himself locked into a full-body hug. He stiffens up at first, but relaxes when he feels the familiar warmth against him. He hugs back as Mike continues to cling to him. There are no tears this time, but an occasional sniffle or two. "You're amazing, Paulo. Thank you." Mike praises into his neck, his voice still small. "How did you become such a great person?" he mumbles rhetorically. "By fucking up and learning from it," the Somali answers honestly. He can feel a weak laugh get huffed into the side of his neck. "Right." They stay like that for a while until Mike calms down. As much as Paulo enjoys being cuddled up to the smaller teen and sharing body heat, he doesn't dare complain when his friend finally leaves his side to pick up a gaming controller. They continue to play video games well into the night, Paulo occasionally supplying them with snacks and drinks from the kitchen. At one point, Mike stands up to go downstairs for something. "What's with the get-up?" Paulo watches Mike return with his jacket. "Going somewhere?" "It's getting too cold for me in here." "How aren't you feeling it too?" Mike asks as he sits back down and tucks his legs into the jacket for extra warmth. "I don't know. Superior Somali jeans, maybe?" the orange teen jokes, playfully dusting Mike's nose with the tip of his fluffier tail. Mike irritably bats it away, clearly envious of not having thicker fur. "I'll go check the temp though. The blizzard might be fucking with the furnace again," Paulo says as he gets up to walk into the hallway. He checks the thermostat to confirm that it has definitely started to plummet at some point. Ugh. "Or we're behind on the oil bill again," he laments as an afterthought. He goes downstairs to try to call his dad for advice, but the call wasn't able to pull through. Great! He decides to visit the furnace in the garage to see if he can troubleshoot it himself. He observes that the oil gauge seems pretty full, and none of the pipes look damaged or frozen. He mulls over what the hell the problem could be. He gives the furnace a salty, swift kick before going back into the house. Asshole. Looks like they're just gonna have to deal with it until his dad gets home eventually. He ends up microwaving some Insta-Hot chocolate with marshmallows for the both of them as an apology. Mike graciously accepts the cup of warmth as they continue to play video games together. When bedtime comes around, Paulo finally realizes that he doesn't have much to spare to give to Mike. There's only one bed, one pillow, and one blanket. "Okay, so you take my bed, and I'll go sleep on the couch downstairs," Paulo proposes. He could use his dad's bed instead, but he internally reasons that it's fucking weird to do that. "Why not just share your bed? We've already sort of shared one before," Mike counters innocuously. Paulo sweats at this. Mike has a point, but also, the hotel bed was way bigger than this. "Well, for one, my Somali fur doesn't mind the cold, and two, it's because I'm a gentleman, and as my guest, you deserve my whole bed to yourself." Mike visibly fights the urge to roll his eyes at the last one. "I wouldn't feel right if I was the only one in your bed. As long as you don't hog the blanket, I really don't mind," he continues to reason. "And also, I wouldn't mind your body heat being nearby," he adds quietly, looking away with a mild blush. Paulo couldn't help but let out a giggle at this, which embarrasses the other teen. "Oh, come on, it's freezing in here. Can you blame me for wanting to keep warm?" No, sorry," Paulo squeaks out, waving it off dismissively. He attempts to regain his composure. "But fine, I'll share a bed with you. Too easy, you dork." Mike seems relieved by this. Paulo is just glad that he actually has a valid reason for them to share the bed rather than just out of guilt. It makes things less weird. As Mike uses a fresh spare toothbrush to brush his teeth for bed, Paulo takes all the dirty dishes downstairs to the sink. He habitually turns the kitchen sink on to a trickle to prevent the pipes from bursting before trotting back upstairs to start getting ready for bed himself. By the time his nighttime routine is done, Mike is already cozied up on his side of the bed, casually scrolling through his phone. Paulo carefully slides in next to him, making sure the Korak gets most of the shared blanket. "Night, Paulo," Mike says, way too chipper for someone who's about to be dead-ass asleep in a few minutes. "Night, buddy," Paulo replies, turning off his bedside lamp and blanketing the whole room into darkness. They agreed to share body heat via back-to-back so they don't shift into position. For some reason, feeling Mike's heat seep into him just feels more intimate than anything they've ever done. The other times they ever had such close contact involved emotional turmoil, but here it's just so casual and almost domestic that it supplies Paulo's brain with naughty daydream fuel. He immediately tries to fight this down. Now is not the time to get horned up over innocent crap like this. "Paulo? Shit. You alright? You feel tense." Paulo huffs irritably. He's not in the mood for this. "Yeah, I'm alright. Don't worry about me, buddy. Really." "Okay." The most unconvinced reply ever, but thankfully he doesn't press the matter like he normally would. He does, however, hesitantly wrap his smaller tail around Paulo's, a sweet, comforting "I'm here" gesture that simultaneously makes Paulo's heart want to explode and head reel with envy. He finds himself to be a little jealous of Mike sometimes. His friend might be rife with insecurities, but he's ironically comfortable with himself in small ways. He doesn't seem to care about the preconceived notions of what is manly versus girly, nor finds being called gay as an insult. He isn't perturbed by it and rolls with what he likes, and for that, Paulo can't help but mentally applaud it. It's the most genuine aspect to him. He's so comfortable with being himself that he thinks entwining their tails together, something that kittens tend to do to comfort each other, isn't a big deal. It's like sleepily holding hands at a sleepover when you're both in your sleeping bags but making sure the other person is still there. The most pure and innocent gesture there is. It's not normally something you casually do with your very teen, very male friend though. Mike doesn't care, because of course he doesn't. He just wants to comfort his friend in a passive manner to let him know he cares. This makes Paulo crack a smile. Adorable little shit. He falls into a comfortable sleep soon after. Until he wakes up with morning wood and arms full of Korat. During the night, the blanket must have been kicked off by someone, probably him, and Mike ended up getting spooned by the Somali for warm refuge. Paulo has one arm tucked under the shared pillow and the other arm comfortably draped over Mike's waist. Thankfully, the smaller teen is still snoozing away, his back flush against Paulo and his hands curled up to his chest for warmth. His head is tucked neatly under Paulo's chin. As much as Paulo loves the position they're in, he can't help but feel embarrassed that his dick is acting like an untouched virgin. Not wanting to be a fucking creep, he doesn't entertain his hormones any further and tries to shimmy away from his sleeping friend. But every time he tries to shift away, he can practically see Mike instantaneously shiver. It wouldn't take long for the short-furred Korat to wake up from feeling too cold, so he has to extract himself strategically if he wants to get out of this with his pride intact. After a few moments of awkward boner dodging and silent cursing, Paulo finally manages to unwind his limbs from Mike and coax him onto the pool of warmth he left behind. He then pulls the blanket over his friend, gazing at him for perhaps a split second too long. He shuffles to the bathroom for a quick shower to calm down. He learns, however, that the shower doesn't help much because now his horned up brain keeps conjuring images of Mike being in the shower with him. This sucks because most of them involve being naughtily creative with the fur conditioner. Ugh, inappropriate. Normally he doesn't mind these fleeting fantasies, but there's a certain layer of creepy with having them of the very person who is blissfully sleeping in your bed right now. Instead, he tries to steer his thoughts toward other people he's fancied before, such as Lucy, Rachel, hell, even Daisy. But they all insist on leading back to Mike. Gloating, he mentally declares that enough is enough and he turns the water icy cold to punish his southbound blood. After getting a heaping dose of boner killer, he gets out of his cold-ass shower and into the cold-ass house. Instant regret. The mixture of wet fur and a cold house isn't a great combo. Thankfully, he manages to find the janky fur dryer from under the sink. After spending way too much time basking under the steady gush of hot air on his puffed up fur, he gallops downstairs to start the day. The first thing he notices is that the snow managed to pile up taller than him now. His inner child thinks about how many sweet snow tunnels he can make. He knows for a fact David will be stoked and is probably going to want to make a snow replica of Atlantis or some shit once things calm down. Beaming, he shuffles over to the fridge to take inventory of what's inside to mentally catalog what kind of meals he can set up for the day. "Morning," Mike says with a yawn as he descends the stairs, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. Paulo peeks over the fridge door to see that Mike managed to wrap their blanket around him and even created a makeshift hood to keep his ears warm. He is sporting the cutest bed head and makes him want to ruffle it. "Morning, you hungry? I can whip something up," Paulo offers. Mike's eyes light up at this and he takes that for an answer. Thankfully, the stove is electric and working just fine, so he gets to cook up a simple breakfast for the both of them. It's just some fried eggs, crispy bacon, and orange juice, but Mike acts like it's a feast fit for a god. "I normally just have cereal or something for breakfast, if that," Mike confesses politely, digging into his meal. "Why did you learn to cook and bake so well, by the way?" Paulo shrugs. "Just something I picked up over time. My dad isn't really home from work until much later, so I learned how to cook so I could have something decent in my stomach for dinner," he says through a mouthful of egg. Mike nods thoughtfully as he nibbles his bacon. "As for baking, it's way cheaper to make your own desserts than to outright buy them." "Makes sense," Mike says rather quietly. "Maybe one day you could teach me a thing or two?" Paul smiles at this. "Yeah, I can do that." After cleaning up and doing the dishes together, the two eventually find their way back up to Paulo's room. They end up chilling on his bed with the television blaring some retro cartoon marathon. The heat is still out, so Mike clutches onto the blanket around him like it's a lifeline. That's when Paulo can practically feel Mike shiver from the other side of the bed. Hey, sorry that the heat is still out, Paulo says apologetically as he scratches the back of his head guiltily. He genuinely feels bad for his friend. He normally doesn't care when the furnace isn't working, but he doesn't like to see Mike suffer because of it. You, want to keep close to keep you warm? He meekly offers. Yes! Mike says shamelessly, catching Paulo off guard. They end up with Paulo sitting on the floor with his back to the bed so that Mike can nestle between his longer legs. The blanket drapes over Paulo's shoulders so that he can serve as a weird tent for Mike. The only thing peeking out of the blanket are their heads. Thankfully, Mike is small enough so that Paulo can rest his head on top of his, so he can both watch TV comfortably. But it doesn't take long for the Somali to try and not to think too hard on how domestic it feels to have Mike tucked so perfectly under his chin like this, to just watch TV so casually while bundled up together on a cold winter day. But no matter how hard he tries, he can't help but hyper-focus on the feel of his short fur, his scent, even the warmth seeping from him. Deep down, it all feels so right. No wonder why Daisy used to obsess over this stork. He constantly resists the urge to possessively wrap his arms around Mike's midsection and then pull him even closer until they're completely flush. It doesn't help that his mind keeps presenting him with impossible scenarios of the two actually being together as a couple. Innocent things like holding hands in the park, going on dates, maybe making out. If only. It will never happen. Only then does he start to relax and continue to watch the mediocre cartoons playing on TV. He's just going to appreciate having his boy crush in his arms for now and take what he gets.